Some people say that time heals all wounds, that distance makes the heart grow fonder, and that forbidden feelings eventually fade away like old photographs left in the sun. They were wrong about everything. My name is Priya, and at 26, I thought I had finally mastered the art of self-control. For 2 years, I had successfully avoided the one person who could shatter my carefully constructed walls with nothing more than a smile. For 2 years, I had convinced myself that what I felt was just a phase, a momentary lapse in judgment, that I had thankfully escaped before making the biggest mistake of my life. But as I stood in my childhood bedroom, unpacking boxes and preparing for an extended stay at my family home, I knew that my carefully maintained distance was about to be tested in ways I wasn't sure I could handle. The reason for my return was innocent enough. My mother had fractured her ankle and needed help during her recovery. As the only unmarried daughter, the responsibility naturally fell to me. What I hadn't counted on was the fact that Vikram Bai, my cousin who lived next door, would be equally involved in my mother's care. Vikram wasn't my real cousin. He was my father's best friend's son who had grown up so close to our family that the lines had blurred years ago. At 32, he was everything I had spent 2 years trying to forget. Tall, incredibly handsome, successful in his business, and possessed of a quiet confidence that made every woman in our small town take notice. More dangerously, he was the man I had almost kissed during his wedding preparations 2 years ago, before I came to my senses and moved to Mumbai for work, putting 800 kilometers between us and the most inappropriate attraction I had ever experienced. "Priya!" My mother's voice called from downstairs, interrupting my brooding. "Dekho kaun aaya hai." I knew that tone. It was the same overly cheerful voice she used whenever she was particularly pleased about something. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I made my way downstairs. And there he was. Vikram stood in our living room, looking exactly the same as he had 2 years ago, except somehow more devastating. He was wearing a simple white shirt that emphasized his broad shoulders, and when he turned to look at me, that familiar smile spread across his face. The one that had haunted my dreams for 24 months. "Priya," he said, and my name sounded different coming from his lips than it did from anyone else's. "Welcome home." "Vikram Bai," I managed, proud of how normal my voice sounded despite the fact that my heart was racing like I'd just run a marathon. The Bai felt forced, artificial, like a shield I was desperately trying to hold between us. But if he noticed, he gave no indication. "I was just telling your mother that I'll be helping out while she recovers," he continued, his eyes never leaving my face. "My wife is visiting her parents in Delhi for the month, so I have plenty of time." His wife. The reminder hit me like a slap, bringing me back to reality. Vikram was married, had been for almost 2 years now. Whatever madness had possessed me before was exactly that. Madness. He was family, he was married, and I was a grown woman who should know better. "That's very kind of you," I said carefully. "But I'm here now, so you don't need to trouble yourself." Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment? Relief? I couldn't tell. "It's no trouble," he said quietly. "Besides, your mother needs help with things that might be challenging for you to handle alone." My mother, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension, beamed at both of us. Isn't it wonderful? My 2 favorite children taking care of me together, just like old times. Not quite like old times, I thought, remembering a version of us that existed, before I realized that the way I looked at him was anything but sisterly. The afternoon passed in a blur of domestic arrangements. Vikram had indeed been handling many of my mother's needs, shopping, cooking, managing her medications. Watching him move around our kitchen with easy familiarity, I was struck by how natural he looked there, how right it seemed. "You've gotten thin," he said suddenly, appearing beside me as I organized the medicine cabinet. "Mumbai life not treating you well?" His closeness was unexpected, and I could smell his cologne, the same one he'd worn 2 years ago, the one that still appeared. In my dreams sometimes. "I'm fine," I said, not looking at him. "Just busy with work." He murmured, and I could feel his eyes studying my profile. "You always were too serious. Even as a child, you carried the weight of the world on your shoulders." I risked a glance at him, and immediately regretted it. He was standing closer than necessary, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough that if I turned fully toward him, some weights can't be put down, I heard myself saying. Maybe, he said softly. Or maybe we just need the right person to help us carry them. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning that neither of us should acknowledge. I forced myself to step away, to break the spell that always seemed to weave itself around us when we were alone. I should check on Mama, I said quickly. She's napping, Vikram replied, not moving from his position. The medication makes her drowsy, which meant we were alone in the house. The realization hit both of us at the same time, and I saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. I should start dinner then, I said, desperate to find something, anything to occupy my hands and mind. I already prepared everything, he said. It just needs to be heated. Of course he had. Efficient, thoughtful Vikram who seemed to anticipate everyone's needs before they even realized them themselves. Then I began, but trailed off because I couldn't think of a single task that would justify fleeing from the room. Priya, he said, and something in his tone made me look up despite my better judgment. Can I ask you something? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Why did you really leave? 2 years ago, right before my wedding, you just disappeared. Your parents said you got a job offer, but what? But it felt like you were running away from something, from someone. My mouth went dry. This was dangerous territory, the kind of conversation that could unravel every carefully constructed lie I had built around my departure. I wasn't running, I said, but even to my own ears, it sounded unconvincing. Weren't you? He took a step, closer, and I felt my back hit the kitchen counter. Because that last night, at the Mehendi ceremony, when we were alone in the garden, nothing happened, I said quickly, but my voice was shaking. No, he agreed quietly. Nothing happened. But something almost did. The admission hung between us like a confession, because he was right. Something had almost happened. We had been alone in the moonlit garden, the sound of celebration drifting from the house, both of us caught up in the bittersweet knowledge that after his wedding, everything would change. You were getting married, I whispered. You were marrying Shruti. I was, he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't identify. But that didn't stop me from wishing. What? He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him fighting some internal battle. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. From wishing that I was marrying someone else. The words hit me like a physical blow. This was the confession. I had dreaded and craved in equal measure, the acknowledgement of feelings that should never be spoken aloud. Vikram, I breathed, his name a warning and a plea at the same time. I know it's wrong, he continued, as if opening some floodgate he could no longer control. I know it's impossible and inappropriate, and that I have no right to feel what I feel. But these 2 years, Priya, these 2 years without you have been... Stop, I whispered, pressing my palms against my ears as if I could physically block out words that would change everything. But he gently pulled my hands away, his fingers warm against my wrists. Have been torture, he finished. Complete and absolute torture. I stared up at him, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. This was the moment I had run from 2 years ago, the conversation that could destroy everything we both held dear. You're married, I said desperately, grasping for the one truth that should make this impossible. I am, he agreed, but his grip on my wrists tightened slightly. And you're my family, and this is wrong in every way that matters. Then why are you saying it? Because, he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Because I've spent 2 years trying to forget the way you looked at me that night. In the garden. 2 years trying to convince myself that I imagined the electricity between us. 2 years failing to love my wife the way she deserves because I can't stop thinking about the woman I can never have. His thumbs were tracing gentle circles on the inside of my wrists, and the touch was sending sparks of electricity up my arms. I knew I should pull away, should remind him of all the reasons this was impossible, should be the responsible one. Instead, I heard myself asking, "What woman?" "You know what woman," he said, his eyes boring into mine. "You, Priya. It's always been you." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm, too charged with electricity. We were standing so close that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the rapid rise and fall of his chest. "This is insane," I whispered. "I know," he replied, but instead of stepping away, he moved closer. But I can't seem to care anymore. His hand slid from my wrists to my face, cupping my cheeks, the way I had dreamed about for 2 years. The touch was gentle but possessive, tender but desperate. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his forehead almost touching mine. "Tell me this is crazy and wrong and that I should go home to my wife and forget this conversation ever happened." I opened my mouth to do exactly that, to be the voice of reason, that would save us both from disaster. But the words that came out were entirely different. "I can't," I whispered. "God help me, I can't tell you to stop." Something shifted in his expression then, something primal and desperate and absolutely terrifying in its intensity. "Priya," he breathed, and then his lips were moving toward mine, slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, to be the responsible one, to maintain the boundaries that had kept us apart for 2 years. But I didn't pull away. Instead, I found myself rising up on my toes to meet him halfway, my hands fisting in the front of his shirt, my heart racing with anticipation and terror and the most dangerous kind of want. Our lips were perhaps an inch apart when the sound of my mother's voice, calling from upstairs, shattered the moment like glass. "Priya! Beta! Could you bring me some water?" We sprang apart as if we'd been burned, both breathing heavily, both staring at each other with wide, shocked eyes. The spell was broken, but the awareness between us was stronger than ever. I began, then stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence. "Go," he said roughly, running his hands through his hair. "She needs you." I nodded and started toward the stairs, my legs unsteady. But at the doorway, I turned back to find him watching me with an expression that made my knees weak. "This isn't over," he said quietly, so quietly that I almost thought I'd imagined it. And as I climbed the stairs to tend to my mother, my lips still tingling from the kiss that had almost happened, I knew he was right. Whatever had started 2 years ago, whatever we had tried so hard to deny and ignore, was far from over. If anything, it was just beginning. Part 2. When resistance crumbles, the next few days passed in a haze of careful avoidance and stolen glances. Vikram continued to help with my mother's care, but we maintained a polite distance that fooled everyone except ourselves. Every accidental brush of fingers when we passed dishes at dinner, every moment our eyes met across the room, every innocent comment that carried a double meaning, it all served to build the tension between us to an almost unbearable level. Threw myself into caring for my mother, hoping that exhaustion would quiet the storm of emotions raging inside me. But even in sleep, I found no peace. My dreams were filled with the memory of his hands on my face, the warmth of his breath against my lips, the way he had said my name like it was both a prayer and a curse. By Thursday evening, I was wound so tight that I jumped at every sound. My mother, thankfully, seemed oblivious to my internal turmoil, chattering happily about how wonderful it was to have both her children taking such good care of her. "Priya, Beta," she said as I helped her settle into bed. "You seem tense. Is everything all right?" "Just tired, Mama," I lied, adjusting her pillows. "It's been a long week." She murmured, studying my face with that particular maternal intuition that always made me nervous. "You know, I've been thinking, you and Vikram Beta have been so formal with each other. Did you two have some kind of fight before you left for Mumbai?" My heart nearly stopped. "No, Mama. Why would you think that?" "I don't know," she said thoughtfully. "It just feels different between you two. Before, you used to tease him, make him laugh. Now it's all please and thank you and carefully polite conversation. It makes me sad." If only she knew, I thought, that the careful politeness was the only thing standing between us and complete disaster. We're just older now, I said carefully. More mature. Mature, she repeated with a slight smile. Sometimes, Beta, being too mature means missing out on the simple joys of life. I kissed her goodnight and escaped to my room, my mother's words echoing in my mind. Simple joys. If only she knew how complicated and dangerous my particular joy had become. I was getting ready for bed when I heard the soft knock on my bedroom door. Priya? Vikram's voice was muffled through the wood. Can we talk? My heart started racing. Immediately. It's late, I called back, wrapping my robe more tightly around myself. I know, but I can't. I need to talk to you, please. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. He was standing in the hallway, still fully dressed despite the late hour, his hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. What is it? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I can't sleep, he said simply. Haven't been able to sleep properly for days. And I know you can't either. I can hear you pacing at night. The admission that he had been listening for signs of my restlessness sent a shiver down my spine. Vikram, we can't keep doing this, I said softly. This tension, this whatever this is between us. It's not fair to anyone. I know, he said, but he didn't move away. If anything, he seemed to lean closer. But I also can't pretend it doesn't exist anymore. You have to, I said desperately. You're married. You have a life, responsibilities. Do you think I don't know that? His voice was rough with frustration. Do you think I haven't spent every day for the past 2 years reminding myself of exactly those things? He stepped into my room, and I found myself backing away, acutely aware of how little I was wearing beneath my thin robe. Then why are you here? I whispered. Because, he said, closing the door behind him. Because staying away is killing me. Because every time I close my eyes, I see you. Because I'm married to a wonderful woman who deserves better than a husband who's in love with someone else. The confession hung between us like a bomb waiting to explode. You can't be in love with me, I said, but my voice was shaking. It's impossible. Why? Because you're supposed to be my sister? Because society says it's wrong? Because it would destroy our families if they knew? Yes, I said desperately. All of those reasons. Then tell me you don't feel the same way, he said, moving closer until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Look me in the eyes and tell me that you don't love me back, and I'll walk out of this room right now and never mention it again. I opened my mouth to say exactly that, to lie and preserve what was left of our carefully constructed boundaries. But the words wouldn't come, because they would have been lies, and we both knew it. I can't, I whispered. Can't what? Can't tell you I don't love you, I admitted, the words tearing from my throat like a confession at gunpoint. Because I do. God help me, I've loved you for years. The effect of my words on him was immediate and devastating. His eyes darkened, his breathing became ragged, and he looked at me like a man who had been drowning and had suddenly found air. Priya, he breathed. And then his hands were on my face again, just like that day in the kitchen, except this time there was no hesitation, no careful distance. This is wrong, I whispered, but I was leaning into his touch, my body betraying every rational thought in my head. I know, he murmured, his thumbs tracing the outline of my cheekbones. I know it's wrong and impossible and that we'll both regret this, but I can't stop myself anymore. His lips brushed against my forehead, feather light, and the contact sent electricity shooting through my entire body. Neither can I admitted, my hands finding their way to his chest, feeling the rapid beating of his heart beneath my palms. Tell me to leave, he said against my temple, his voice rough with desire and desperation. Please, Priya, be stronger than I am. Tell me to walk away. Instead, I tilted my head up to look at him, and what he saw in my eyes must have been answer. Enough. Because the next moment, his mouth was on mine, and all the careful control we had maintained for days, for years, completely shattered. The kiss was everything I had imagined, and more. Desperate, hungry, filled with years of suppressed longing. His hands tangled in my hair, and I could taste the storm on his lips, could feel the tremor in his body as he held me against him. God, he murmured against my mouth. I've wanted this for so long. How long? I whispered back, needing to know, needing to understand the timeline of this impossible love. Years, he confessed, his lips trailing down to my neck, finding that sensitive spot that made me gasp. Since you were 22, maybe earlier. Since the day I realized you weren't a little girl anymore. His admission sent a shiver of pleasure and guilt through me in equal measure. Because I knew exactly the day he was talking about, my 22nd birthday party, when he had looked at me in my new dress and something had shifted in his eyes, something that had made my young heart race with possibilities I didn't dare name. That's when I knew I was in trouble, I confessed, my fingers working at the buttons of his shirt, needing to feel his skin against mine. We're both in trouble now, he said, but his hands were sliding down to my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. The thin material of my robe was no barrier against the heat of his body, and I could feel every hard line of muscle, every ragged breath, every tremor of desire that matched my own. Your wife, I whispered, the words like a knife between us. He stiffened for a moment, and I saw the conflict war across his features. I know, he said quietly. I know, and I hate myself for it. But Priya... He cupped my face in his hands, his eyes boring into mine. I can't love her the way she deserves when my heart belongs to someone else. This will destroy everything, I said, but even as I spoke the words, my body was pressing closer to his, my hands exploring the warm expanse of his chest. Everything's already destroyed, he replied, his voice breaking slightly. I've been living a lie for 2 years. We both have. His mouth found mine again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. His hands roamed over my body with a reverence that made me feel like something precious and forbidden, something worth risking everything for. I love you, he whispered against my lips. I love you so much it's consuming me. I love you too, I confessed, the words spilling out like water through a broken dam. I've tried so hard to stop, but I can't. I can't stop loving you. We kissed again, deeper this time, and I felt the last of my resistance crumble like sand. This was wrong, impossible, devastating, and absolutely inevitable. His hands found the tie of my robe, and he paused, looking at me with eyes that held both question and desperation. Are you sure? He asked, his voice barely audible. Because once we cross this line, we can never go back. I finished for him. I know. And you still want to? Instead of answering with words, I reached up and kissed him, pouring all my love and longing and desperate need into the contact. He groaned against my mouth, his control finally, completely shattered. The robe fell to the floor with a whisper of silk, and in that moment, standing in the moonlight streaming through my bedroom window, we crossed every line that had ever existed between us. But even as his hands mapped the contours of my body, even as I lost myself in the warmth of his touch, I could hear the voice of reason screaming in the back of my mind. This would have consequences, terrible, far-reaching consequences that would touch every person we loved. Priya, he breathed, against my ear, and the way he said my name, like a prayer, like a confession, like the most beautiful word he had ever spoken, made me forget every rational thought. Don't think, I whispered back, pulling him down for another kiss. Just for tonight, don't think about anything except this. Because tomorrow would bring reality crashing back down around us. Tomorrow we would have to face what we had done, what we had become, what we had destroyed in pursuit of the impossible. But tonight belonged to us. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made us both freeze, our hearts stopping in unison. Who could that be? I whispered frantically, reaching for my robe. Vikram's face had gone pale. I don't know. It's past midnight. The car door slammed and we heard voices. Familiar voices that made my blood run cold. That's impossible, I breathed. But even as I said it, I heard the key turning in the front door lock. Surprise. Woman's voice called from downstairs. We decided to come back early, Vikram's wife. Shruti had returned from Delhi, and from the sound of multiple voices, she hadn't come alone. The voices downstairs grew louder, Shruti's cheerful chatter mixed with my parents' surprised welcomes. They had returned early from Delhi, bringing my father with them from his business trip. Vikram and I stared at each other in horror, the spell completely broken. Reality crashed down like a tidal wave, washing away the warmth of moments before and leaving only cold terror in its wake. Get dressed, he whispered urgently, grabbing his shirt from the floor. I'll go downstairs, make some excuse for being here so late. I nodded, pulling my robe tight around myself, my hands shaking uncontrollably. What do we do now? He paused at the door, his hand on the handle, and looked back at me with eyes full of pain and regret. We live with what we've done, he said quietly, and we pray that love is worth the price we're about to pay. As footsteps climbed the stairs, Shruti's voice calling his name with loving concern, I realized that some lines, once crossed, don't just change your life. They shatter it completely. And sometimes, even when you know the cost, love leaves you no choice but to pay it. The bedroom door opened, and our secret spilled into the light.